So there seems to be this popular new trend amongst conservative commentators in America, and it's that they're going to great pains to maintain the issue of moral equivalence when talking about the Israel-Hamas war happening right now. And if they're not talking about the issue of moral equivalence, then they're touting the idea that America should not get involved in foreign wars, or that they should not be concerned at all about stopping Iran from obtaining nuclear capability. On a surface level, these issues, they might seem morally and sensibly correct. They might seem like common sense. As you guys know, however, I am an unapologetic Christian Zionist who stands unconditionally with Israel, especially right now. I'm also an American citizen who, ironically, has no problem with the idea of America first. That being said, I have two specific reasons why it's absolutely vital for Americans and Christians all over the world to stand unconditionally with Israel, especially right now. I'm Luke, and this is the Israel Guys. Welcome to the Israel Guys, where we believe that in a world of anti-Israel propaganda and Jew hatred, you should have a direct connection to the land and people of Israel. Guys, thank you so much for being with us today. Let me know if you're a new viewer or subscriber down in the comment section. Make sure to hit subscribe and hit all those notifications so you don't miss out on any of our content. Just wanted to remind you quickly, you can join our Telegram channel. Link is down in the description below to get all of our breaking news updates, videos, articles, etc. And as we're approaching the holidays, I wanted to let you guys know that we have beautiful and inspiring and educational Israel-inspired products and content on our store, and every purchase goes to supporting the work of the Israel Guys, which is 100% free for all of you. You can go to theisraelguys.store or click the link down in the description below. If you want to get some amazing gifts and also inspire and educate your friends and family about Israel, go to theisraelguys.store. So, since the massacre that happened on October 7th, 2023, it really did not take very long for traditional media to turn against Israel. What actually really surprised me, however, was how conservative media started following suit. Now, I'm not talking about all conservative media, but there are several conservative commentators that are prominent in America, and they kind of started turning on Israel. Not 100%, but not also they didn't want to be seen as pro-Israel. They wanted to be seen on the side of moral equivalence, this whole vague, generic idea of moral equivalence. And they also wanted to be seen as someone who was against Palestinian suffering in Gaza, which, you know, we're all against that idea, but their ideas are more to blame Israel for what's happening than to stand with Israel. Specifically, I'm talking about Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, also Elijah Schaffer. Now, I'm not going to get into personally attacking any of these people. I actually agree with a lot of their views and their stances and have great respect for the work that they're doing. But this specifically is about the Israel issue when it comes to these influencers and commentators, and about why they're wrong, okay? So quick recap, quick overview. Elijah Schaffer, he compared Israel's bombing of Gaza to the abortion issue in the United States, said pro-lifers should also be against Israel's bombing of children in Gaza. Tucker Carlson, besides what we're going to get into in a second, which is where he gave Candace Owens a platform to defend herself against everyone who's coming now calling her out for her anti-Israel stance. He also talked about how America should not get involved in a war with Iran, which I'm personally not going to get involved into right now. I just simply know that Iran needs to be stopped from nuclear capability and from their goal of destroying Israel and America, or possibly the entire free Western world. But he said America getting involved in a war with Iran could be disaster. But I think he actually said the end of America is what he said. But right now, I want to take a couple of minutes and focus on Candace Owens, because she is the one that has made the biggest noise on this issue. She started making her name for herself a few weeks ago by making very interesting comments on social media, attempting to maintain, again, this idea of moral equivalence. I think we're going to do an entire episode on this idea because everybody wants to have moral equivalence, right? Sounds like a really good thing. But when you have a murderous ISIS, worse than ISIS group who has vowed to eradicate an entire people group and an entire nation on one side, and you have a free, democratic, first world, very moral nation and military on the other side. There's no comparison. There's no comparing these two and saying we have to have moral equivalence between these two groups, right? So after the internet began to call Candace Owens out on her comments on social media and things she was saying on her podcast, she decided to have a pro-Israel Jewish comedian on her show. I believe his name was Ami Kozak, to give the pro-Israel perspective. She wanted to be fair and balanced, right? And we applaud her for that. Now, it was a good interview. I watched most of it. But interestingly enough, she kind of started showing her ignorance, almost made a little bit of a fool out of herself by trying to compare the Muslim quarter in the old city of Jerusalem to the old segregated South that her grandfather grew up in. Now, obviously, we know she even used the word apartheid, I believe, but she definitely said, I was walking through the old city, and it just felt like the segregated South that my grandfather grew up in, that Muslims could only be in the Muslim quarter, which obviously we know is not true at all. There's no apartheid in the old city of Jerusalem, but she just showed herself to be really not know what she was talking about on the issue. Showed herself to be very ignorant on Israel and Israel issues. So after that interview, she kind of doubled down. She started quoting vague Bible verses about blessed are the peacemakers. And then she got into an argument with Ben Shapiro, who is one of her colleagues at the Daily Wire, obviously. And there's a whole debate. She's going to be fired from the Daily Wire. But all of her comments are like saying things like blessed are the peacemakers, or I'm going to get into another comment she made about how no government should commit genocide. But she was never specifically calling Israel out. So everybody was wanting to know, like, where do you actually stand? Well, it turns out she definitely does not stand on the side of being pro-Israel. She wants to be seen as someone who stands on the side of being very fair and balanced between the two issues, right? Because then she went on to have Norman Finkelstein on her show, like a week after she had Ami Kozak, the pro-Israel person, on her show. She wanted to have a pro-Palestinian person. He says he's not pro-Palestinian, but he absolutely is. Norman Finkelstein, who ironically, he's Jewish, has ancestors who went through the Holocaust, but he is definitely very pro-Palestinian and very anti-Semitic when it comes to Israel issues. So she had him on her show, and now there's no doubt in anybody's mind that she is definitely trying to ride this line right between Israel and Hamas, right, on these issues, because the majority of the Palestinian people, you can't just say that you care about the Palestinian people so much that you have to condemn Israel for defending themselves against Gaza, right? And you can't ride this line and pretend to be pro-Israel, but at the same time be actually like pro-Hamas in Gaza by pretending to be pro-Palestinian, right? She even compared these issues to the COVID debate, saying I want to read something to you. So after all these accusations, arguments back and forth between her and Ben Shapiro, she wrote a long statement on X, previously Twitter, right, where she attempted to explain her position. But I want to read two sections here. She said, "Here is what I've learned in politics. Never, ever trust anyone who only presents to you one side. Never trust anyone who yells at you for wanting to hear both sides. Never trust people who call you stupid and put you down for admitting that you don't know everything. These people are authoritarians, not experts or respectable journalists." As just one example, the experts didn't want to debate about COVID and vaccination for a reason. That's because they were liars and frauds. Now, I don't have a problem with wanting to listen to people from both sides in the majority of cases, except when one side actually goes and massacres another group of people with a known public charter of basically a mission statement of their goal in this mission statement is to wipe out the other group of people off the map completely, using tactics that are worse and more barbaric than ISIS in their nature. And then their goals are to move on to America and the rest of the world, because that's what radical, fanatical, jihadist Islam wants to do, is to take over the entire Western world, right? Then in that situation, no, we absolutely do not have to, as Candace Owens said, only listen to both sides of the debate. We do not have to have one side the first world democratic Israeli side, and then on the other side have a side who supports genocide against that other group of people who actually went out and did it using torturous, barbaric, inhumane tactics. And the only reason they didn't murder more than 1,200 people is simply because they were stopped by the other side. Then no, we don't have to listen to both sides. She says, never trust anyone who yells at you for wanting to hear both sides. You're putting out the fact that you don't want to be pro-Israel, you don't want to be pro-Hamas, right? So you have people from both sides. This is not what this debate is about. This is good versus evil. This is moral against immoral, right? A couple more things from Candace Owens' Twitter post or X post. She said, quote, no government anywhere has a right to commit a genocide ever. There's no justification for a genocide. I can't believe this even needs to be said or is even considered the least bit controversial to state. Obviously, what is she talking about here? Because she's probably, again, trying to ride that fence in between the two sides of the issue. Later on, she talked about how ridiculous it was that everybody rushed to accuse her when she never mentioned any specific government. Then, right? So my question is, that's fine. Clarify what you're talking about, please. Tell us which government were you referring to? Because obviously, if you were just referring to Hamas, then you would have said that. And if you're referring to both sides, then yes, that was absolutely wrong and that was absolutely incorrect and an evil message to put out on Twitter. Embarking on a remarkable journey, Israel 365 has launched an initiative to provide the Israel Bible to every U.S. senator and congressman in our government. Why? Because it's time to rekindle the connection to biblical teachings that once laid the bedrock for our nation's core principles. Dive into history and you'll discover that even the Constitution drew inspiration from the governance model of the 12 tribes of Israel. It's a living testament to how biblical narratives profoundly influenced our nation's political structure. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley echoes a sentiment that resonates deeply: the lamentation of America's departure from its dependence on biblical teachings and traditions. This departure has led to the erosion of values that once unified our nation. The consequences? The list is long. A growing ignorance of the Bible's teachings leads to moral decline, increased crime, family breakdowns, and a surge in support for ideologies conflicting with our founding principles. What's the solution? To provide the Israel Bible to every U.S. senator and congressman in America's government. The reason is not just to bridge the knowledge gap, but to remind our leaders of the timeless wisdom within the Hebrew Bible. Understanding the biblical foundation empowers America's leaders to make informed decisions aligned with our historical values. But it doesn't stop there. Isaiah prophesied, "For instruction shall come forth from Zion, the word of God from Jerusalem." And sponsoring Israel Bibles for Congress and Senate does just that. It offers crucial pro-Israel talking points deeply rooted in biblical theology. The campaign envisions collaboration with senators and congressmen to unite Christian and Jewish faith leaders, forming a powerful advocacy force for Israel. But it's up to you. Be part of bringing God's word to the U.S. Senate and Congress. Click the link below for more information and join the movement to reignite the flame of biblical wisdom in the heart of American governments again. So Tucker Carlson gave Candace Owens a platform on his Tucker on X show, where he gets tens of millions of views, I think, every single week. When Tucker Carlson, who I've really respected in the past, and I think he's right on a number of issues, he says in his interview with Candace Owens, quote, "There's an emotional response that is disproportionate to what happened on October 7th on the part of some commentators." And he went on to talk about, and then he went on to compare it to how America is being invaded by foreigners who may hate America. We don't know who these foreigners are. Millions of people are dying of drug overdoses. So basically, he's comparing what happened on October 7th to how America has much bigger problems, which maybe they do, with drug overdoses, their borders being infiltrated, the southern border, foreigners coming into the country who hate America, those types of things. Candace Owens' response are basically to say something to the effect of people are emotional about this issue because they have family in Israel, homes in Israel, or they have friends in Israel who are affected by this. She said, that's fine, but they can't expect the rest of us to be so upset and emotional and spending all of our time talking and defending Israel because we're not as connected to it as they are. They went on to compare Candace Owens went on the interview to compare past rhetoric on college campuses, like anti-white rhetoric, the whole racism issue, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, that kind of thing, to genocide. And her and Tucker Carlson both said that the anti-white rhetoric and wokeism happening on college campuses is actually genocidal. Basically, they're saying what happened on October 7th is comparable to what has been happening on college campuses, and they're saying it's actual genocide. I just want to clarify one thing. Tell me how many people are dying from these issues you're talking about on college campuses versus how many people died in Israel on October 7th. I'm not saying it's not an issue. I'm not saying drug overdose is not an issue. I'm not saying America's southern borders being infiltrated is not an issue. They absolutely are. But don't try to compare them to the most horrific massacre of the Jewish people that's happened since the Holocaust that killed 6 million people. Now, to put it into proportion for you, we started running the numbers. David, our editor on the show here at the Israel Guys, he ran these math numbers for me. So October 7th, 1,200 people were killed in Israel. 5,500 or so were wounded, and over 240 taken hostage. Now, if you equate those numbers to America's population, right, because there's about 10 million people in Israel. I didn't look this up, but I think there's about 340 million population in America. You take those numbers, this massacre is equivalent to 42,000 people being killed in one day, in one massacre in America, 8,500 being taken hostage, and 171,000 being injured. Now, for reference, there was 3,000 people killed on 9/11 and 6,000 injured. And America looks at that as probably as the most horrific tragedy to happen to America in our recent history. If something this horrific had happened in the United States, what would commentators from other countries have to say, especially first world democratic Western countries and countries who are considered America's allies? Would they say, sorry, but it's a disproportionate emotional response to care too much about the massacre of 42,000 people that just happened in America. And I know more than 8,000 are currently being held hostage, but we have our own problems in our own country, so you can't expect us to care too deeply about what's happening in America. We're really sorry it happened, but we can't get too deeply involved. I just want to say both Tucker Carlson's and Candace Owens' statements are very much out of touch with the reality, very similar. And they'd be very similar to them making these types of statements in the months or the weeks after the Holocaust happened. According to Candace Owens, you basically have to know someone in Israel to have the right to care deeply about what is going on. Now, she obviously says she does care deeply, but you can't take it too far, according to her and Tucker Carlson. This was the worst tragedy to happen to the Jewish people since the Holocaust. I suspect this could have been, if they were commentators in the 1940s and 50s, they might have had similar reactions to the Holocaust. And if this were the year 1948 and Israel was fighting a war of survival against 6 invading Arab countries, they might have be saying very similar statements, even though 6 million people were killed and then Israel was attacked and the fighting a war of survival and the war that ended up being their war of independence. All of that being said, here's a very simple, this is according to me, my opinion, very simple explanation on why there are 2 reasons that you and everyone else around the world, if you're American or if you're Christian or if you're both, why you should stand unconditionally with Israel. Number 1, fighting for Israel is fighting for America. Israel is simply, Hamas invading Israel and trying to wipe them off the face of the map is simply phase 1 for groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, and any other fanatical, radical, jihadist Islamic groups. From the river to the sea, if they accomplish that goal, that means Israel is gone. They're wiped off the map. they will then turn to other Western civilizations. Iran has stated openly that Israel is the small Satan and America is the big Satan. They've stated openly that they're coming for Israel and America. If America backs, stands with, or even fights for Israel, it is also fighting on behalf of America. Fighting for Israel is fighting for America. Israel is literally holding back the wave of fanatical Islamic extremism from America's borders. That's reason number one. But reason number two is for those who believe in the Bible, whether you're Christian, whether you're American Christian, or you're Christian any other place in the world. If you don't read the Bible and you don't care at all, then this probably isn't for you, but you should probably look up these passages that I'm about to tell you about. Deuteronomy 23 says that 23 verse 3 says, no Ammonite or Moabite or any of their descendants may enter the assembly of the Lord, not even in the 10th generation. Why? Because they didn't come out to meet you with bread and water on your way when you came out of Egypt, and they hired Balaam, son of Beor, to pronounce a curse on you. The nation of Ammon, the ancient, now extinct nations of Ammon and Moab, were severely punished by the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob for simply not caring about Israel or providing them with food or water when they were on their way out of Egypt. It was very simple. Israel asked them for food and water when they were traveling through the desert, and they said no. They said, we don't care. And because of that, they were not able to enter the assembly of God, even to the 10th generation. And that's Old Testament. If you're Christian and you believe in the New Testament, Matthew 25 talks about when the end of days, God will gather the nations and separate the righteous from the evil, essentially the sheep from the goats. Those who will be invited to join God in his kingdom are those who took in the strangers, fed the hungry, gave drink to the thirsty, clothed the needy, etc., etc. But he says, quote, as much as you did it to the least of these, my brothers, you have done it to me. Jesus' brothers are the Jewish people. Jesus himself was an Orthodox Jew who was born in the land of Israel, spent the majority of his ministry in the land of Israel. And in the end of days, when the nations are judged, you can also look at Zechariah chapter 14. The nations will be judged based off of their treatment of Israel and the Jewish people. Jesus says, if you did it unto the least of these, my brothers, you did it unto me. And then he goes on to say the opposite. If you didn't take care of my brothers and my brethren, you didn't take care of me, and you'll be kicked out of the kingdom. We could go on and on about this, but it's very simple. If we truly believe the Bible, then the blessing of Abraham from Genesis 12 is absolutely real. God's plan of blessing and prosperity for the entire world, all the rest of the nations around the world, comes through that blessing that God gave to Abraham and his descendants. It really is that simple. So, in conclusion, if you want to come from a political or a common sense level, it makes sense to stand with Israel because they are the doorkeepers holding back Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, and more from invading the West. And if you're a believer in the Bible, it is our mandate and our window into experiencing the blessing of Abraham to unequivocally and unapologetically stand 100% with Israel. Guys, don't forget to tell me what you think about this comment below, about this topic in the comment section below. Don't forget to join the movement of providing the Israel Bible to every U.S. senator and congressman by clicking the link down in the description below. Speaking of the Bible, our government in the United States needs to pay attention to the Bible, especially with what it has to say about Israel. So check out that link in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe on whatever platform you listen or watch the Israel Guys on and get that conversation going down below. As always, tune out the fake news and tune into what is actually happening here in the land of Israel. We're here every single day with your direct connection to the land and people of Israel.